Hey everybody, welcome to Table Talk. We have some awesome friends with us today, and we're talking all things next generation, along with just discipleship and what God's doing in the church. So really glad that you guys joined us. And to my right here is LB, my beautiful wife, Lauren Blair.
Yes, I'm so excited to be back and hanging out and talking all good stuff.
All good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So the conversation today is going to be very seamless, but we're talking about next generation. And when I say next generation, I'm really talking about Generation Z, and this is ages 7 to 27. And, you know, we're all kind of on the cusp of that. Lauren and I are like right outside of that window.
Oh, honey, so right there.
Outside of the window, yeah. So why don't you go around and introduce everybody?
Yes, so we have Caleb Hills over here. Caleb is amazing. Usually he's behind the camera.
Well, usually where I prefer to be.
Yes, but he is such a blessing to us. Does all the camera work and is so gifted in so many ways, and so we're glad.
We've had a lot of great conversations before and after sermons. Caleb is really well thought.
Yes, so insightful, so wise, and we're just glad he's here with us today. And then we have Lojo, Lauren Benton up here. Bennett, yes, and Lojo is amazing. We've known her for a lot of years, since she was 5, and she's no longer that age. She's a grown, amazing woman of God, and literally comes alongside of us and helps us in every way. She's gifted. She's so incredibly gifted.
And she was our flower girl.
And she was our flower girl.
Yeah,
and
so
now literally she can lead like in incredible ways. It's like mind-blowing. So we're so glad that she's here with us today. Yeah. And then we have Olivia. And Olivia is incredible. She is doing amazing things at Chick-fil-A. And we met Olivia probably a few years ago, right? When you and Jesse started coming to Hill City. Yeah. And this woman has so much in her. And she just kind of come right alongside of me, and so wise, so amazing with kids. We call her like the baby whisperer, because she can love on any child, and they all look up to her and adore her. And all 3 of them have hearts of gold, and just I feel honored to be even sitting at the table, and just thankful for you guys. So we're glad to hear your wisdom and your input today.
Yeah.
Really,
and
really
seamless. So, I really want people to get to know you guys for a second. Yeah. Okay, so Lauren and I gave you a good intro, but like, why don't you, Caleb and then Lojo and Olivia, why don't you guys just share real quick, how did you guys come to Christ? How did you come to faith? And
Yeah. So I have sort of the stereotypical answer of I grew up in the church. Going to church every Sunday. I think I started running a soundboard when I was 7 years old in church.
Wow.
For like a kids ministry. So I've been in church. And I think more specifically for me, the question is like, when did my relationship with God get serious?
Yeah.
And there's sort of been different like really high points for me. Honestly, it's almost facilitated in some ways. In high school, there were times, specifically after some youth camps, that I got really serious. There was one youth camp where I spent 40 days afterwards fasting all electronics, which for me
that's a big deal for you.
That's a big deal.
Thing. And then
you might have beat Jesus there.
Yeah.
He's like, look, that's impressive.
Yeah. And then most recently was summer of 2017 was Brian Henry was planting Treeline Church at that time. I lived in Indianapolis. I didn't actually even know Brian, other than like he was a pastor at a youth conference I went to, and basically got connected through him, friend of a friend, and God was just doing some work on my heart in that time, and made basically a big leap of faith, moved out here. I didn't really even know Brian at that point.
Wow.
Moved out here to help start Treeline Church, and God just really used that to sort of kick faith to a different level for me, of going, let me just move out here. I don't know anyone, but this is worth doing. That's important. God, when you move, when you're standing still, it's a lot harder for God to do things, but when you start moving, there's so many more opportunities for God to do things. So I guess, that's the sort of long, short version of that story.
Yes,
wow, that's really good. I have a lot a lot of questions. So let's go to Lojo for now. We'll get to it. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of similar to Caleb. I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor. And so I think that growing up, my faith was kind of always not fully mine, because it was like, I kind of feel like I had that part of me. It had to do with my family. So similar to Caleb, my faith became really real to me as I grew older. I think I would say like senior year of high school, whenever I started an outreach club at my school, and I was able to reach other students for Jesus. And I think that was a big point. And then honestly, just going into college, because I feel like that's a really big time when people decide what they're going to do, because it's no longer about your family, and you can no longer just go to church with your family. You have to now decide what you're going to do with your Sunday, with your day-to-day, with your life. And so in college, I would say that my faith really became real to me when I really started to pursue God and everything he had for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, also similarly, I was raised within the church, just a little bit different. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and it was a little bit just of like something that you were required to do every week.
Yeah.
We go on Sunday, that's just how it is. And when I turned 18, I just started to get a little bit more curious, a little bit more intrigued by what God really wanted from me and what that relationship was supposed to look like. And so I had a really great foundation. I had a wonderful foundation of faith. I had a wonderful foundation of the Bible, but I didn't understand the relationship that God wanted with me. So I just started exploring, and that is when I came across Hill City. And I just remember being in worship and just really truly feeling the presence of God and realizing that that was a point in my life where he just wants me to seek him and just make some changes that are, geared towards him and the kingdom. So I just think that was a pivotal moment for me. And ever since then, just have been trying to live that out every day. So,
Really interesting. Awesome. You see any correlation there, Laura? You see any correlation between the three stories? You have people who were raised in church, but then got serious about their faith.
Became your own,
yeah,
right? At
faith
some
became
point,
your own.
No matter how,
That's really good.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a decision that comes that's like, wait, this is between me and God, not anybody else.
And it was all three different too, because Caleb is like really involvement, and then, the Lord deals with him to help Pastor Brian.
Right.
With Lojo going to college, she makes a decision. Now you were running an outreach. I remember it's at Riverside High School. That's it. I'm sorry, I forgot for a second. But you were like leading other teenagers to Christ, like in a major way, right? I remember you had like 400 kids at this event that you ran, right?
Yeah.
What was that event?
Well, there's two events. The one was a movie night.
Okay.
That we did, and it was like a faith-based story of, I forget her name. It was like Rachel something, and it was called like the Rachel's Club or something. So we kind of partnered with them, and I made this movie night event, but it was faith-based because I think she went to Columbine High School or something. So it was like a really good story of her faith, and so that was cool. So a lot of kids came to it that probably didn't have relationships with Jesus, but then they were able to see through that movie, they were able to just even have a seed planted. So that was really cool.
Was it your responsibility, or that moment that you were like, I have people to reach around me, that caused you to really become serious about your faith? Because I don't, I know you, but I don't know in that heart, like, when did you really become serious about your faith?
I mean, I think that was a step, but I honestly think it was more in college, whenever it was like my decision.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense.
To spend time with God, and to go to church, and to have the right friends, and to do the right thing. Like, I think that's really when it became serious, because it was like, you can't just look to your siblings and your parents anymore. Like, this is your life, and you have to choose what you're going to do with it.
Wow.
So, that's what I would say.
Wisdom. Very good.
Yeah.
And then Olivia, for you, just in worship.
Yeah.
You felt the presence of God. And
and I would also bounce off of the college statement, because I was heading into my freshman year at Chatham University, and you're really tested when you head to college, because there's a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And so I think that is definitely when you feel that urge to get the most serious, because you know the temptation that's going to be coming from anything in the college world.
The pressure,
it's a lot of pressure. So I would also just say that I think that's huge. That's a big thing for people.
Yeah.
I would actually I think my story is a little bit different. I think it is sort of important to highlight, there is sort of the stereotypical college thing, and like, I don't mean that as a bad thing. It's very much a very real thing. For me, I think my experience was a little bit different in the sense that I still lived at home when I went to college. And so I didn't actually have that many major changes. I actually was working the same job I worked through high school. Kept doing, like, working at a computer repair store. And so for me, what actually I think ended up happening was just a very slow, so I mentioned there's a youth conference summer 2017. I got sort of connected with Brian Henry in that. But it's very much just God slowly was like poking me and being like, hey, why are you so stagnant? What's not happening? And I think for me, the thing I would highlight is there is a big commonality between all of us, though, which is movement and change.
Yeah.
And I think that's when God can really get a hold of people's lives. Is if you're, like I said, I was doing the same job I had was doing since I was 16 in high school. I was going to the same church, volunteering in the same youth group I grew up in, and none of those things were bad. Don't get me wrong. But when I finally realized that, like, hey, I need to like create some opportunities for God to move and do stuff, and it can be through something like college, or for me it was God basically just hit me over the head and made it really obvious I needed to move to Pittsburgh. But like once you allow those moves and changes to happen, I think that's when God can really move in a big way.
That makes sense. You kind of open yourself up to what he wants to do.
Stepping out of like comfort too.
Right.
It's a big,
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you guys stepped out of comfort, was there like a relationship that really helped you all along the way? Was there somebody that you could tie your faith back to say, hey, this person really put their arm around me at a good time? Or
I mean, I think for me, I was able to, like, I grew up in a small high school, so everyone knows each other. I think at college, I was able to really, like, choose my friends. And I think that those relationships helped me a lot to just start to grow a community of believers.
How did you find that, though, in college? Was it just a college ministry, or?
No. It was kind of just a bunch of random things. Like, sort of my roommates, one relationship where we became best friends, and she was my best friend now, she was an atheist, and I just kind of brought her alongside me, and she got to know the love of God. Another just kind of random relationship that we played basketball against each other when we were young, and we just sort of got connected. It was honestly just a bunch of like random God things, like being in the same major as one of my best friends. And and then once we started Church Anywhere, it was kind of just people invite, like asking people to come, and then some of those people became my best. So just a bunch of different God moments, I would say.
Yeah, and you have amazing community up there.
Yeah.
Olivia, same for you? Like,
I mean, I think I've been challenged by a lot of people in my life, like the relationships in my life, in a really positive way. A lot of them, my big thing is my work family has always played a really big part of who I am, and just just how I follow God and all of that. And then even just some people from Hill City as well, like Tori and Eric Farmer were pivotal in mine and Jesse's growth spiritually. So definitely just thankful. It's kind of like what you're saying, like just kind of along the way, just picking up those people in that community. It just happens. Like God just makes it happen, you know? So,
and even challenge, like in your spiritual walk, kind of like
challenge in a good way.
Challenge in a good way. Continue to grow. Like, hey, just like pushing in the right direction, kind of. That's awesome.
Wow.
Oh, that's
community
cool.
is a huge part of both of their stories. What about you, bro? Or Caleb?
So mine, there is definitely a single person, especially in like sort of the most in me moving to Pittsburgh. So Chris Schilling was getting into the story a little bit more. He volunteered in Brian's youth group back in Indiana, in Portland, Indiana, and he was a volunteer there. And I've been working with Chris. Chris had also been actually a volunteer at my church when I was a seventh grader. He was a small group leader back then. And so Brian announced, hey, I'm moving to Pittsburgh, starting this church. And Chris actually reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm thinking about moving out there. Are you interested in doing this thing? And my initial answer was obviously no. And God had been working on me, and like there were lots of various pieces that were moving, like realizing I need to move on from my current job and other stuff. But Chris just made a really big ask that sort of seemed crazy, didn't make a lot of sense at first. And specifically with him, it wasn't just a, hey, I need a roommate in Pittsburgh so my rent will be cheap. But it was, hey, let's move out here. Let's live intentionally. Let's do discipleship together.
Wow.
Let's use our house or apartment to invite people over.
Wow.
Let's not just make this, a place to be, but let's try and build community, build relationships, do creative video projects, do like music recording, etc. And so it was a very intentional thing.
Wow.
On that.
Wow. Okay, so intentional community is a huge part. That's really amazing. You were drawn to that.
Oh yeah, no, that was definitely one of the reasons. I moved out here, and one of the things that like God was making clear. Well, community and relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it sounds weird, but you can, well, I think it's sort of almost the default model of doing community without relationship. That can happen way too often. And in some ways, I think that was sort of my story growing up, was I was heavily plugged into the church community. Like I was, there at 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. I usually wasn't leaving until
serving,
9 p.m. in the evening after youth group would wrap up on Sunday evening. I was in the community. Everybody knew me, but I don't know if I can say I had good, deep relationships.
Yeah.
And so
right.
I think it's both of those pieces. It's an intentional community that's building relationships, and you can't. And I guess the one last thing I'd throw on there is be careful about judging relationships in the sense that you're like, my relationships with these people don't measure up to whatever this thing I aspire to. Because that was another thing growing up that I did. I was like, oh, my relationships don't. My old youth pastor, I was like, oh, I didn't actually think that much of our relationship. Like, yeah, I co-led a small group with him of 7th grade guys. And like we talked some, but it never felt like, oh, he has these deep relationships with all these other students. But now that I look back on it, I'm so incredibly grateful for that relationship, even if it didn't seem that deep at the time. So I think this is a long tangent now, but intentional relationships, and don't discount the relationships you're already in, even if they're not as deep as you think. You can also, when you recognize that, you can turn it into something more. So Nate, in some ways, my old youth pastor, I now have a deeper relationship with him than I did when I was like living there in Indianapolis, because I realized how much of that I was missing and how valuable some of his input was. And sometimes there's just like, random brunches when I go back to visit Indiana have been some of the most valuable, insightful conversations I've had.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to see the value of that true relationship whenever you have it right in front of you. Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and you think like it feels so natural. Maybe it should feel more supernatural.
Right.
What are you thinking, Laura? You got
no,
something
I feel the same way. Sometimes when you walk through seasons like that, you don't really appreciate, the little moments, the little relationships that you do have. But I just think that's super cool how that relationship continues to still be, he still has a valuable voice in your life, and how important those connections are. I was thinking about that even today. I don't even remember what it was this morning, and I was thinking, man, wonder where Zach and I would be without PL putting his arm around us.
Right.
Like, I have no clue where we would be without those relationships.
Yes.
It's truly amazing.
I specifically say because he believed in me without wanting anything out of me.
Right.
It was because he actually cared about me. And, a young person having a relationship with somebody, you snuff that out if they just want something out of you.
Right. He took the time, though.
I could tell the difference. I'm like, wait, this guy doesn't want anything out of me. He just wants to see me become the best version of me that I can possibly be.
Right.
Yeah. And that's amazing. And so we all have that in our lives. It's commonality.
Right.
And I think sometimes we do forget about that. That's good. That's good, Caleb. So I just want to ask you guys, like, what are you seeing within your generation right now? We said the word intentionality, right? Yeah. So who said that one? Was it? Olivia. It was Olivia.
Olivia said that earlier, and then Caleb just said that too, which is cool. Like,
It's this word intentionality. Come on, give us more on that. You guys, intentionality. Is that a big need within the next gen, ages 7 to 27? Like, what's?
I think so. I think that our culture nowadays, we live in a lot of vanity nowadays, and when you really think about what the next gen needs, like they need people showing their hearts, pouring into them, and like believing in them, and just making sure they're aware that they're for them. You know what I mean? So I think intentionality is the first step to try to get somebody's heart in line with God. So anything more?
Yeah, I mean, I think it means so much whenever, like what you were saying, how just knowing that someone cares about you, and I feel like that intentionality put with just like authenticity, just knowing that like there's no fluff. I think that that's what I've seen a lot with this generation, especially like college students. That's who I'm around the most. Is they just want authentic people and authentic sermons and the truth and
genuine,
love and just people to be real. They don't want a show. They don't want entertainment. Like they just want
the real
Okay,
deal.
so this is older, it's outside of that generation question here. Is it because people realize how fake everything in the social media world really is? Like,
I mean, that's probably what it is. That probably plays a part in it because,
when you think about like trying to build upon your faith, like you want that experience to be the most real, the most genuine, the most authentic. When everything else in your life seems to not be, like you need to know that area of your life is something that can be genuine, that you can lean into.
Makes sense.
Because like a lot of the times we're putting on a mask to for social media or whatever it may be for everybody else, but if you start to believe that like what God believes in you is enough, you won't care about how others let you down or disappoint you, because the reality is like human beings are going to disappoint you. Other people are going to let you down. But when you realize that like God's enough, and you're able to be intentional about that relationship and have people be intentional about that relationship with you, that's huge.
It's huge.
Being genuine and authentic. I like the word authentic, and like, so that's great.
Okay, so is there like a huge pressure for next gen to be like extremely perfect, like in every area? Like, does that come from family? Does that come from societal pressures? If that's so.
Yeah. Why?
Or is there a propensity for them to be the exact opposite? Like, I'm not going to be perfect because everything,
Right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
I think there's both. There's definitely those pressures very much exist. I think people feel them, but I think the answer to those does come back to that authentic thing. People want... I don't know if people even recognize that the social media thing is fake. I know there are people who do.
They're not able to put their finger on it. Like, that's what it's coming from.
But they're constantly searching for things. Like, so if I'm thinking... So specifically, I'm trying to filter things through the lens of who are my friends who don't know Christ? What do their lives look like? What does their pursuit of whatever it is look like? I think authenticity is definitely a very common thing for me, my hands down, my biggest like cross section of friends who aren't Christian is the rock climbing community. It's one of the things I spend a lot of time on, very invested in, and there are a lot of people in that community where that has become their religion because it can be, like, to me, rock climbing, one of the reasons I love it is sort of, it's very real, it's very authentic. Like, there's your mind and your body are fully engaged. You can't do it if you're not like fully committed. And I think that's what draws people into that community sometimes. You literally have somebody's life in your hands when you're belaying them. And I think there's some tie-ins there as far as those people I know, they're looking for that. They're looking, like, I have lots of like different like text groups with people looking for just like climbing partners and friends and community. And they're constantly searching for that. And when I think back to the climbing relationships that have the most value, they are making those connections. They are making those authentic, spending a night camping together and then like getting up at 6 a.m. to go to the crag and climb. Like, you get to know people in a different way, and a lot of people seem to be very, very hungry for that.
Yeah. Not much different than an older generation. I just feel like maybe we don't articulate it as much. Maybe we're the ones who aren't as in tune with our relational needs and the search and drive for it. And
I think that goes back to the social media thing, where because of social media, people see it but they're trying to solve it in a social media manner, if that makes sense. They're trying to solve it through the lens of social media, of like getting that quick fix, of getting that, let me just find the right group where I'm going to fit in, and that's going to take care of it. Instead of let me put in the work to have tough relationships. Because like hands down, my most like valuable climbing relationship she's someone who like we're really good friends, and it came out of all those conversations. God was doing a lot of things in her life when I met her, but like through our climbing relationship, she actually started attending Treeline, ended up accepting Christ because of that, because God was doing a whole bunch of other things in her life. But it was really obvious to me that she was in the outdoors community, in doing these things because she was trying to find that connection.
Search for that so much.
And like I said, I think that, and so many other people I see, they're doing it in that microwave fashion. Like, Rose,
Right.
a friend I was talking about, it wasn't a microwave fashion. It was a,
Right.
hey, I'm going to stick this out. We're going to have lots of hard conversations about theology and why some of the stuff doesn't make sense.
Right.
But then so many of the other people I know, they don't want to go there. They
Yeah.
just want the quick fix.
Like they
Yeah.
want the surface kind of surface level.
Yeah.
But do you guys feel like your generation, the generation younger than you, like they want the hard in
Well,
the good, the bad, the ugly. Like they don't want the surface. They want the like.
I was about to say,
They understand the cost.
yeah,
of, like,
let me rephrase
discipleship
that.
and, yeah.
They don't want the surface, but they only know how to search for things on the surface.
surface.
That's
Right,
all they're
right. That
used
makes
to.
sense.
That makes
They
sense.
Yeah.
want the deeper things.
Right.
Right.
But they don't know
They
how
don't
to
know
fight for
what
that
that-
kind of. They
yeah.
don't know what
And
that
then,
is.
like
They
when
don't
that
know
comes
what it
up,
means.
it's ugly, it's hard, it's tough, and they're like, oh no, I'm out, never
Right.
mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Loja, you feel like you have a unique perspective in working with teenagers as well. With that, like when we were at Jack Camp this year,
Yeah.
you see these kids so hungry for the things of God,
Yeah.
yet they probably didn't know much. I mean,
Right.
Can
yeah.
you speak to that?
Yeah, for sure. Like at Jack Camp, a youth camp this summer, that there was about 280 kids or something. Yeah, they were so hungry. Like
Yeah.
it was amazing to see. They wanted God. Like they were so open and just so available, and they it was so evident that they wanted the real present.
Yes.
They wanted Jesus, and it was so clear.
Yeah, no
Yes.
fake.
Yeah.
It was interesting because I reached out to
Yes.
all their youth leaders and I said, how many of these kids are actually disciples of Christ? And there weren't very many.
Right.
But if you walk into the room, it looks like everybody is. Like
Right.
they're singing the songs, they're dancing around, they're raising their hands,
Right.
they're bringing Bibles and everything. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is interesting to me. This is really
And
interesting.
even like emceeing one night, I was like asking kids, like, what's your favorite part of Jack? Every single one said worship. Every
Yeah.
single one. No one
Whoa.
said the games or
Right.
lunch time, like nothing.
right.
Like they all
Of course,
said,
not the food there.
not the food.
Of course.
What am I getting?
You'll have to try it.
Definitely not. But they all said worship, and I just think
Yeah.
it was so cool to see that that's what they wanted. Like
Right.
they just wanted to
Yeah.
be in the presence of God and
Right.
to experience His.
Yeah.
real
So they're
good.
hungry for the things of God,
Yeah.
like
Right.
next gen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because you see the negative statistics of the next generation disengaging from church, not
Right.
being there, and so people automatically assume that they're not spiritual, like
Right.
they're just they're all
Yeah.
atheists or whatever, but that's not true.
No, not
Right?
at all. And I think that the ones, okay, maybe maybe this generation isn't following as God as much as the last, which it's not. But the ones who are like so on fire.
Yeah.
And really just want
Unashamed.
Him. Unashamed, yeah.
Yeah, and that's powerful.
Yeah.
Right.
That was really there was a moment where I realized we can teach deep things to these kids. They don't
Right.
know much, so maybe we have to
Yeah.
like ramp it up a little bit. But like, wow, like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
really good.
I think that's what's so amazing though is that like you guys, everybody was able to give them a platform to figure out the why behind the what.
Right. I was
And
just going to say
they-
the why behind the what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Right.
now, even though they don't know much, they were being given that opportunity.
Right.
And, that's what they need. They needed somebody to be
Right.
intentional
Right.
about
Right.
providing that platform.
Yeah.
And now they know the why, and now
Right.
they're fired up.
Yeah.
So,
And even
Right.
and even continuing now, it's like why it's so important for the older generations to now like disciple these kids
Right.
because
Yes.
they're so hungry but they don't know a lot.
Right.
So I feel like that's why
Right.
it's so important for us, if it's younger, older people, to come alongside them and help them.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
So yeah, because sometimes older generation, will say like, well, what part do we have? Or like,
Right.
these young people don't want to hear what they have to say.
Yes.
So what would you even say to the people that are like older? Like, do you feel like your generation, the generation lower, wants somebody older that's been through life to teach you the why behind the what?
Yes.
Like, is that important?
Yeah.
And why? Yeah.
I mean, I know one sermon that Zach preached said about like things that kids said about their parents.
Yeah.
And it was saying that like basically what the parents was doing for them meant a lot to the kids, even though they may not have expressed it. So maybe students act like they don't care if someone's coming alongside them asking them about their day and their week, and they're just like, oh, it was good, but like that actually does mean
matters.
so much to them.
Yes.
So I think that the older generation, what you have to say matters. Like, we are young, the generation that's in our generation, but they're younger than us, or even younger. Like, we don't know we don't know that much. You have so much more wisdom than us, the older generation. So I think that that's so important.
And I would take us in a slightly different direction too, of sometimes it's just being in students' lives. So one of the things that shocks me, and I'm still learning from, so I mentioned in my old church, we had a small group model where 7th graders would get together with a leader and they'd stay with that leader until they graduated high school. My junior year of high school, I volunteered to help co-lead the incoming 7th graders with our youth pastor. And so I had a group of guys who I was with from when they were 7th graders to when they graduated high school. But the really interesting thing for me is looking back on that, if I look at what I said and did, I don't honestly remember that many like deep theological conversations or honestly even as many like talking through their hard problems at school with them. I honestly don't remember much of that. I don't really feel like that happened. Yet, I was there every Sunday. I was in their lives. We were at the summer camps together. And it's really crazy sometimes how they'll still come back to me with those things.
Right.
And the conversations and relationships we still have from them have there. Even, and I guess this goes back to that thing I was talking about earlier where sometimes it doesn't seem like in the moment that the relationship that you're in is this
that
amazing,
big of a deal.
like,
Right.
sort of to put your relationship with PZ on a pedestal. Like, that's obviously a really cool relationship. And I think for me at least, sometimes it's easy to be like, no, that relationship didn't measure up to that. I wasn't as intentional with those guys as I could have been. And that is, to be clear, like that's honestly a regret of mine. That's something I wish I had done better and want to learn to do better. But even with that being said, even though I didn't go as deep as I wanted to go with them, the fruit that I'm still seeing from that is, even though like in my head it was mostly just, late nights doing pizza, doing video games, like playing card games.
Right.
And yet that still had so much of an impact. So yes, it's fantastic with the things that come from those deeper conversations, but just being present.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say your presence and your example were the two things that were really big there, because you were still setting an example. So even though you felt that you weren't diving super deep into theological matters, you were still setting a good example for them of like, walking with God. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Being there for them.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, and very rarely do they want to jump into the book of Revelation and
They just want a relationship, right?
Yeah,
They
they
just
just
want a
want to know that
relationship.
they matter.
Yeah, and sometimes in
Yeah.
the kingdom you don't see how a relationship such small can really, but over time, relationships take work, discipleship takes work.
Yeah. And the questions will come, right?
Right.
To talk about the deep things, that stuff comes, but you have to put in the time, you have to build relationship.
And you always
with
say
people.
that, like people want to know, what is it?
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right. Like build that relationship first, and then their hearts will be open to the things of God.
Speak truth into their
Right.
lives.
Yeah.
Right.
Think about the relationships that rub us the wrong way. It's the people who tell us what to do and they
Without
don't really
having a
love
relationship
us.
with us.
You're like,
Right.
you need to do this, you need to do this. And you're
Right.
like, I'm going to avoid that relationship.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that right now.
Right.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It's so true. So, Lojo, you're running a group right now at Slippery Rock. It's killing it with Church Anywhere. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has been really cool. We've had our group almost 2 years, and
That's
I graduated
awesome.
from
I
Slippery
love
Rock,
that.
but we're still in Slippery Rock. So
Because you're an achiever. I mean, you graduated early from Slippery Rock.
That's right.
yeah, a lot of my
Get it
friends
done.
are still
Yeah.
graduating in this fall or spring.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been so cool. I mean, obviously it's a lot of college students in that area, but it's just thrived. Like I think that, again, what we were saying, like the people my age and a little younger, like college age, just loves community. They just want real people and not perfect people. They just want the real life and the real gospel, and no fluff. And they love just like hearing the truth from Pastor Zach's heart. So yeah, I think that it's been really cool to see, and it's just said a lot about like the age of students, that this is like what they long for and need, especially in college, and especially at Slippery Rock University. When there's like a lot of worldly things going on, like anywhere, but there is, and so it's so important for them to get plugged in, and it's just been really cool to see people feeling like this is their community, and seeing people grow. It's been great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It,
And
it
I just
reminds me
wonder,
of Debbie James for you.
Go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
I remember
well,
that.
no, I just wonder, like, how important and valuable that is to be able to process what you're learning. Like, it's not just like spewing a message and like check church off the list.
Right.
Like, no, actually, like, this matters in your
Right.
life.
Yes.
Right.
Like what we're teaching you, these biblical truths can impact your everyday life, and here's how,
Right.
and here's why,
Right.
and this is why it matters.
Right.
It's not just like this is just because. It's like, because discipleship, like, in like real community, like, it can change your life.
Right.
Like, it literally change the direction of
Yeah.
where your life is going.
Right. And having those discussions like gives
Yes.
us that opportunity to, if anyone has questions, or to share your ideas. And there's a lot of people who are newer Christians in our group, and a lot of people who grew up in the church, a lot of people who grew up Catholic, like just diverse.
Just a mix, yes.
But it really provides that opportunity to
amazing.
discuss. And again, we try to always like answer the question, even though it's basic, like, how do we apply this to our lives? Like, what
Right.
do we do instead of just like going to church one day and then just leaving and not really thinking about it? Like, let's sit here and talk about, what are we going to do with this message we just heard? What are we going to do? What does that mean for us this week?
Yes.
It's so good.
So
it's so
good.
Yeah, and
Love
I
it.
think about how much we all grew up in youth ministry. You know, I grew up serving, like at 18 years old, I started serving in a youth ministry, but we started to realize with your particular age group that we needed to change things, that just coming to church and then
Changing
having
the
a
game.
message and
Right.
having worship wasn't enough anymore. And so we
Right.
went to a groups model. And I remember even thinking like, oh, you know, we have to have, we're either going to be a church of groups or a youth ministry of groups or a youth ministry with groups. And I always wanted to be one of groups, but it was just before its time. But I always wondered, you know, hey, you all are now, you are the church, you know, you
Right.
are the ones who are going to be leading even the generation
Right.
underneath of you. And in this season, like, there's 45 million Americans, I think it is, who are between the ages of 7 to 27 right now. And so things needed to change. And at the youth ministry level, but from the main service level, where they must change as well. Like, I just don't see you guys now injecting yourself into a system where it has to go back a couple of years in your mind, you know, like we have to think about the future.
Right.
And so Lojo, I not to ask too much out of you today, but with that group, you said something to me that stuck with me. You said, hey, we had church anywhere today when it was a church together service, you know, and so without context, we meet together and then we meet anywhere. That means like we're online and meeting in homes all over the place. Okay. So you guys stayed at home, but watched the live service, and you said, we felt the presence of God.
Yeah, it was so cool. So, right. Usually whenever we are in homes meeting, there's a sermon like particularly, or made for that week, but we watched Hill City live in Carlington. We watched the live service, and it was about just like God who heals and restores, and it was just like a really powerful message from Pastor Zach. And the presence of God was like so real in that room, and it was just so interesting to see. Like, even our discussion, I feel like people were still kind of like processing, because the sermon was really good, and it ended with a worship song. Too Good to Not Believe was the song it ended with, and that worship through a screen, through a TV, like, we were all still like moved and like could feel his presence.
Yes.
And it was just a really cool thing to see that you don't have to even be in person. Like, you could be in a living room and a worship song played through a TV can still like impact you so much. And it was really cool.
Whoa.
Yeah, but then it was cool because we got to talk about it.
Yes.
You know, like, we
Right.
still got the full
Right.
experience.
Right.
I mean, not full experience. Being in person is
Right.
so great, and seeing, you know, the real, like, it's great, obviously.
Yeah.
But we still got to, like, be a part of it
Right.
from home.
Right.
And then we got to discuss it and be like, what
Right.
does this mean for us? So
Right.
it was great.
Wow. So thanks for running that
Everybody's
live
known
stream,
and
Caleb.
Yes, Caleb.
Yeah.
Well, cool is like everyone's known and seen in that moment, you know what I mean? And they're
Yeah.
able to like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. Love it.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And so, did you have similar experiences? Like, I know you guys drove 2 hours to the farmer's house. It seemed like
Yeah, it was a long time.
You know, and I remember particularly like you're drawn to worship. I know you,
Yeah.
so that model had to be like difficult for
Well,
you.
I'll tell you what. Eric Farmer does a good job on the guitar.
Yeah,
There was something.
worship songs.
Yeah, there was something about being in a living room
Yeah.
with children and like my sibling and my now spouse, and just like being with friends and a community and just like, it was so real. It was so raw. And we were just singing. It didn't matter what key we were in. It didn't matter how it sounded. Like, we knew the words we were singing, and we knew, like, that's all that mattered.
Wow.
It's good.
So I think, like, for worship for us, actually, the biggest thing for me was seeing the little ones, being able to know the words and sing them. And that was just eye-opening for me. So, yeah, it was a wonderful experience.
But it wasn't perfect.
It wasn't perfect at all.
No.
There were moments we'd start late. There were moments there'd be donuts on the floor. I mean, there was chaos.
Yeah.
But even through the chaos, like, God was still there. He still showed up, and it was just real. Like, that's all it was.
Yep.
Wow.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's so powerful, isn't it?
Love it. It is. It is. I think that's the beauty of it. You know what I mean? That's what we're after.
What we've been saying
Our
is that,
hearts are
like,
after.
what we've done in the past isn't wrong, it's just incomplete.
Right.
And we need to make sure, like, to cultivate relationship and continue along these lines, even though it is pretty messy sometimes, you know, and, you know, sometimes, you know, the live stream might not work, or, you know, that's very rare with you, by the way.
Yeah, very rare with Caleb behind the scenes.
Figure it out.
But I think it's just like we're tired of playing church. I think a lot of people are. You know what I mean? You just don't want to play. You just want to know God in a real way, and you want to bring others alongside of you. Like the power of just bringing someone, asking someone to move with you, bringing someone along your journey with you changes the game.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, Ben and I just talked about ministry being messy. And now
Right.
we're allowing people into the mess. And I think a lot of times in seasons prior, we didn't want to let people into the mess of ministry. It was like it was a perfectly placed service. The service flow was perfect.
Right.
But now we're finding, you know, people are getting exposed now to the imperfection, and they're like, wait a second, I thought this would be easy. I thought the will of God would be easy.
Right.
But that there's donuts on the floor while you worship. Isn't that like actual life?
Yeah, that is for real life. At least in our house, it is.
It is, yeah,
you know,
definitely.
with toys everywhere and everything else.
Yeah.
It's the truth. Life is not perfectly neat in a box. Same with your walk with God. Like, I think it's important to understand that and see that, and to show the generation after us that this is life. But you're going to get through it.
Yeah,
like, no matter what.
I think you're also giving a lot of opportunity, and a lot of younger people the opportunity to kind of lead within discussion,
right?
Which is huge. When you go to
Right.
church, you sit in the chair and you listen and you worship, and then you leave. But when we're actually in discussion and we're able to
Right.
engage in what we're reading and be able to understand it on a deeper level, I think there's something also really special to that.
Yes.
So you're creating leaders within these
Right.
groups because they're being given the opportunity to share their heart and share their voice in it.
Yes.
So that's huge.
Good
That's
point. That's
powerful.
awesome.
You guys have so much to teach us. I have learned so much from all of you. Like, literally. I am dying to know more and to learn from you guys. Like, that's what I love about it too.
Yeah, okay, Caleb.
No, so I'd actually sort of build on that a little bit more too. Just saying I think it actually builds on sort of the last 2 points that were made of giving the next generation opportunities to be involved and to interact and speak up. I'm specifically thinking of, like, especially me, like I said, I grew up in youth group. I was, you know, youth group Sunday nights. I was doing like Bible quizzing. I was running sound for the youth band. Like, I was in everything youth group related. And like, yeah, I was plugged in. But where it's the most valuable is going back to Zach's point about not being perfect. And I think it's the combination of those two is so important. Because, like, even the church I grew up in, there was definitely, that pressure to be perfect. That if you're going to be a leader,
You have to be perfect.
Yeah, you can't be admitting fault or whatever else. And like, I think it's the combination of those things is leaders not being perfect and because that's the story of the Bible. That's what God does in the Bible. Is time and time again He takes faulty, imperfect human beings and works through them regardless.
He sure does.
And
That's so true.
And I think having that being modeled for the next generation, encouraging them to dive in and take a part of that, is where it's at. It's a combination of engagement, and giving people a voice, and well,
it's a big deal.
The other half of that is listening.
Right.
Yes, and I remember having a moment where I thought demanding people to be perfect is empowering them to lie. Right.
100%,
Well, that's
100%.
true. That's true.
it's in the mess. I think sometimes even Lauren and I have been processing just when it comes to faith, it doesn't always work out. Things don't work our way.
Right.
And we need to know how to respond when everything doesn't go our way.
Right.
And the power of being around other people who are processing the same thing as you, or maybe they processed it a generation earlier, like, I went through that 20 years ago, and now I'm on the other side, and I can tell you everything's going to be okay.
That's true.
So my question for you guys is as I pivot this just a little bit, is think about this, okay? So you have maybe picture a 70-year-old, okay? And a 70-year-old who's gained trust with you and cares about you, and you're like, okay, I care. You say in your heart, like, this person genuinely cares about me, okay? That 70-year-old says, hey, I have some things on my heart for you. Do you think about their age and think, I don't want to hear what they have to say because of their age? Or do you want that wisdom? Like, where are you guys with that?
I would say I absolutely would want that wisdom. I just think that knowing that they've been there and that they've made it through and that they do have all that wisdom and experience, like, that can be so meaningful. And I even think about, like, my grandma, I never got to be around my grandparents too much because I lived in New Orleans, and my other grandma, I have like 30 cousins, so she had a lot to handle there.
I hear you. Spread out love.
But being around even like my husband's grandparents, or like the time I do get to spend, like, that's so valuable to me. I think just to hear their wisdom and to hear what they have to say. Or even I'm thinking of a pastor who, he's not that old, maybe he's in his 50s, but like or even Pastor John Nuzzo, like he has so much to share, and like that means a lot to me. Or even, they don't have to be a pastor, but just knowing all that experience that they have is so great. Like and just humbling yourself, like, I don't know everything, like I'm 22, like I don't know what I'm doing, like I want help. You know what I mean? Like that's such a big part of it too.
Yes.
No, absolutely. I would 100% agree. Like, the question of, like, do I want input from other people? Like, absolutely. Yeah. Like, that's been so valuable in my life, like, across the spectrum. And I think for me, it's worth clarifying that we're not talking like just spiritual things here.
Right.
And like, I think that's one of the big things with this generation is, like, it's hunger all around, and it's not just the spiritual. Right. Yeah. And I think, or rather, I don't think this generation, there's hunger all around. They don't realize it's spiritual hunger, so they're trying to fill it through everything else. And I think the best way to approach it is holistically, and recognizing that there's a hunger across the board, and it's not just spiritual hunger.
They
don't
all
want
the aspects of
I don't want just your stories about how God worked in your life. I want to know how you got through finances. I want to know how you got through marriage and relationship issues. It's not just,
that makes sense.
It's not just the spiritual side. And to be clear, I'm not like discounting that. That is so important.
Right.
But I think that's a lot of what people are hungry for is the whole picture and the whole input.
Makes sense.
So even, I guess I would say, yes, we value, if you're an older person, we value your input. And it's not just, even if you feel like, I don't have the input to give on the spiritual things, okay, that's fine.
We need help in all the other areas too. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So good.
That's so good. Well, because spiritually it affects, everything. So of course it impacts in all areas. Right. But like walking through marriage situations or
relationships,
friendships, like everything. Yeah. It's so huge.
Yeah, most people want to live a life that matters. And so when you see somebody who's living a life that counts, like a life filled with purpose, you're like, I want to bite of that. I want to see what that's like.
Right.
Absolutely. Anything to add to that, Olivia?
I was just, we had kind of already touched on it, just like that truth and love. I would say, like, even for somebody like myself, like, I will listen to you all day long if I know that you care about me.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is,
like, that part is so important, right?
It's so important. I mean, if I know that you're not for me, I'm shut off. I'm not going to be engaged. And so I think there's a lot of people like that. Right. And so I will listen to the truth if it's in love.
If I know you've seen me, you love me before, like, you know what I mean, that way.
Yes, my words,
absolutely.
at my best.
Yes.
And I will.
That
listen.
love is like consistent and steady.
Yeah,
it's good.
So good.
I love that. So valuable.
This
talk
actually,
so valuable.
this has been a lot. There's a lot of value here.
Yes.
I think about the reason I asked that question is because I think a lot of people, when you start talking next generation, how are we going to reach the next generation? How are we going to help them? They start to think in an older perspective, oh, this is a next generation church, so then there's nothing for me. But what we want to do is inspire people of an older generation to pour their lives out into other people. So long as those are good, wholesome, you know what I mean, giving good advice across the board. And
sometimes it's just like one season in front of somebody. It doesn't have to be like such a big age gap. Sometimes it's just like
it doesn't matter the age. Are you where I want to be, and do you really care?
And do you care about me? That's the ticket.
And that's where with PL, it was like, do I want a family like yours? Absolutely. So then I'm watching him, love his kids and the good, the bad, and the ugly, and those things impacted my life forever.
Right.
Never once thought about age difference. And I'm like, it's obvious, but in the same sense, I'm like, who cares?
And most people desire a relationship before you just tell me what to do.
100%.
Right. I mean, like, that's just like a natural thing.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes even the older generation, I got to tell them what to do, and I got to tell them what to do. No, you got to love them first and build relationship with them.
It's going to happen.
Like, rapport is huge.
It's going to happen.
You know what I mean? Like, relationship is huge first.
Yes.
And they'll ask you questions. Just build that relationship.
100%. Yeah.
Relationships change the game in discipleship.
They really do. Well, in the New Testament, relationship and discipleship were hand in hand. They weren't separated.
Right.
Right. You followed after. Paul followed after Gamaliel.
Right.
Right. The apostles, think about how Jesus discipled them. Mm-hmm. They were the disciples. They were the first disciples. He brought them into his life.
Brought them completely
in. The lesson here
right.
is there's a lot that's taught, but there's also a lot that's caught.
Right.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Right.
You catch it.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes that stuff that's caught is more important. Yeah. You know what I mean?
But it doesn't feel as important,
right.
and it doesn't feel as impactful from the teacher perspective.
Right.
Because it's normal
even
to you.
Like, it's just more memorable.
Right.
Like, even the other day, I was watching you with Noah, and just like hugging him, and I feel like you were like whispering something in his ear, and I was like, oh, he's probably like saying something nice. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I was just like, that's so cute.
He was asking me about going to Kennywood for that.
Exactly. In my head, it was like this super like.
Yeah. But no, those matter. Those moments stick in your mind.
I was like, oh, I want to be like that with my son.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those. What's caught is more memorable too, I would say.
It is.
You don't remember what people say.
And you can't catch stuff if you don't spend time with people and you're not around them and intentional.
Yeah, and I think another big word there in terms of intentional and all of that is also just like vulnerability. Mm-hmm. Because like I learned that in my work life, like I can't try to impact others' lives unless I'm open and vulnerable with them about what I've experienced, and kind of like what you even talked about, like you don't only want to hear about the good that God's doing. Like there's other areas of your life, like there's lows, and when you're vulnerable enough to share that with people and let them know like what you've walked through, like then they're more willing to listen to you and walk through it as well. So.
100%. That was actually where I sort of want to go next. Is that like I think Zach, you made some comment about like people like we obviously want people who are pouring into the next generation to have lives that are good examples. But that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. Right. In fact, going back to, we're talking about the mess in the relationships, like it means if you're going to pour into other people's lives, you can't present yourself as perfect.
Right. Yeah.
And the vulnerability piece of that. Like, I think to me, that's something I did not often see modeled. And I think, going back, like vulnerability is a great word for it. And like, no, you're not going to be perfect. You're saying like to the 70-year-old, like, do I want to hear from you? Absolutely. And I don't want to hear that you're perfect. Let me be blunt. I don't want to hear about everything that you've done right.
Right.
Good that you've done.
Right. But like you want to hear our failures are also
I want to learn from
like,
you.
Oh my gosh, like we did this the wrong way. So you know what I mean? Like little areas
vulnerability I think is a fantastic word, and I think that really captures it, because like it's speaking for Zach, but I think we can say as a church we want people pouring into it whose lives and whose hearts are pointing after Jesus. That's what we're after. We're creating Jesus disciples, and as long as that's where you are, even if you don't have the rest of 100% sorted out, like that's, again, I'm sort of speaking for you, but like that's what we want as a church, is that like, no, you don't have it all sorted out, but you're focused on God, you're centered on God, and you're pushing towards that. Like, that's what I want to see. That's the people I want pouring into my life.
Yeah, I agree.
Even though you don't have it all figured out.
Good.
That's so
good.
That's so good.
I love that. I'm kind of the same way. I love that. like, be real with me, please. You
Yes,
know what I mean?
please be vulnerable.
Because then if
Yes.
not, our faith gets shaken. I feel like when we're not perfect, we're like,
When
oh, is there
things don't
something
go
wrong
right.
with
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Is there
Right.
something going on with my faith? Oh no, this person told me that like they were believing, they were trusting, and then this didn't happen. But then God still came through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're able to see that. It's huge.
The long game. We have such a
Yes.
short mentality.
Right.
Like, listen,
Right.
I'm a pastor, okay, and I study the Bible. Like, that's what I do. And it took me like 3 years into church planting. That means I'm like 15 or 16 years into ministry to realize that half of the Psalms plus are actually Psalms of lament. Like David
And grief.
Yeah.
Right,
was
right,
grieving
right,
things. He's like,
right.
how long is Saul going to chase me?
Right.
Like, why do I have to
Right.
hide my face? You
Right.
anointed me. Like, when are you going to come through,
Right,
God?
yeah.
And I think it is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think
Right.
that's something that we've missed in the last season of church, that God's really opening up now. People understand
Right.
it's all right to not have everything together. It's
Right.
okay. And
It's a
but
journey.
just keep on
Right.
going. Just God's gonna
Right.
work this out.
Right.
God's gonna work
Absolutely.
it out. You know?
I think one last piece that I want to
Get
add is I just want to like empower the older generation because of the fact that there may be times where you feel like you're speaking into other people's lives and you feel like you're doing what you should be doing to help them or give them that truth, but you're not seeing the fruit from it.
Wow.
And the reality is like
Wow.
you may
Yeah.
not see the fruit
Come
right
on.
away. You have to remember that like it's a process. It takes time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So don't be discouraged by not seeing that
Yes.
fruit. Like if
point.
you planted
So
that
good.
seed, like
Yeah.
you
It
planted
matters.
it matters.
That matters, yeah.
Don't think that it was for nothing. Like
Yes.
it might be years from now, and that is unfortunate that you can't see that until
Right.
5 years from now. But like God will take that seed and he'll make
Right.
it work. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
So good. So important to remember
Yeah,
that.
True.
in the beginning of
Huge.
Genesis, God said 3 things are going to remain: seed, time, and harvest.
Right.
That is very good. So you
Oh.
plant a seed; it takes time.
Yes.
it's in the dark, and then eventually it's gonna harvest.
so
Yeah.
don't get
Yes.
discouraged.
Exactly.
So
So
good.
good. So good. And
Yeah, it
even
comes
with
with a
that,
cost. So
the Apostle Paul addressed that too. It's so wise of you. The Apostle Paul addressed
Right.
that too. He said, that, I planted and Apollos watered. You know, and so there's people who plant and there's people who water, but God's the one who gives the growth. He's the one who
Right.
gives the increase.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So good.
that's very good wisdom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything to say
So good.
before we wrap it up?
No,
today?
I agree.
This has been so good.
I love it all. I think it's true gold.
Yeah.
All of you have true gold in you. And
Yes.
thank you for taking the time with us today because it helps us, to know, and to hear from you. And I just love it.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you guys for
Yeah,
wanting to
thank
hear
you.
from us.
Yes.
Like knowing
Yeah.
that you're listening to what we have
Yes.
to say and moving in the direction of, we have to reach who's next to keep going
Right.
forward. So,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Feel very heard.
Aw, good. It's huge.
That's good.
It matters.
But here's
it
the
really
thing,
matters.
it's and you guys are doing that for my kids though. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right,
Like
yeah.
Lojo, your husband is a good man for my boys to look up to.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just honor you guys and appreciate that, Same Caleb, all the work that you've done around
Yes.
here to create an atmosphere where we can reach kids and
Yeah.
it matters. And Olivia, of course, everything that you do helping LB over here, but then also
Let's get it. But you know what? You
memorizing
even mentioned
names
she mentioned names of
Yeah.
this is what matters for these kids, like pouring into certain named kids. I'm like, oh, that's so important. Like
Yeah.
knowing who you want to pour into that's behind you.
Right.
To not just like tell them everything, but to like truly be a part of their lives. It means the world.
Yeah.
It means the world to people.
Yeah. So
it
good.
matters. It
Yeah.
truly matters.
Yeah. Thank you guys from the bottom of our heart.
Thank
Seriously,
you.
you guys are great. You did great. So, all right, as we
you.
close today, we are just talking about church and everything within that. This idea of church anywhere, church together, how we got here. If you were helped by this and you think somebody else could be helped, I would love if you would just send this to somebody. You can subscribe to our channel here, and thank you for joining us today. Have a good day, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye. See ya.